Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are exploring the life and mind of one of the 20th century's absolute titans, the French philosopher and social critic, Jean-Paul Sartre. Now, I want to jump right in and immediately hook you with the immense weight of Sartre's most provocative and probably his most famous idea, that we, as human beings, are absolutely condemned to be free. It sounds like a total paradox, right? I mean, how on earth can freedom be a condemnation? Well, as we'll see, for Sartre, it is the defining, inescapable reality of human existence. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap. We're going to cover 1. The intellectual formation of Jean-Paul Sartre. 2. Existence precedes essence. 3. The pillars of existential philosophy. 4. The politically and socially committed intellectual. And 5. His lasting legacy in human thought. So, part 1. The intellectual formation of Jean-Paul Sartre. Let's look at the early life that shaped this really remarkable thinker. He was born in Paris in 1905 into an upper-middle-class family. And right away, Sartre experienced a profound loss. His father, who was a naval officer, passed away when Jean-Paul was literally just 1 year old. So he was raised by his mother and his paternal grandfather. But despite that early tragedy, he went on to absolutely excel. He attended some of France's most elite academic institutions. We're talking places like the Lycée Louis Le Grand and the incredibly prestigious École Normale Supérieure in 1924, where he was rubbing shoulders with future philosophical heavyweights like Maurice Merleau-Ponty. A massive, massive influence during those formative years was his grandfather, who was a teacher. He intensely encouraged young Sartre's reading and just continuous intellectual exploration. Growing up in this rich cultural atmosphere, in a home just totally filled with books, Sartre famously viewed himself as exactly that, the child of the library. He spent countless hours reading and reflecting, a youth he later chronicled in incredible detail in his famous memoir, The Words. Following all that early education, Sartre earned his agrégation in philosophy in 1928, which is the absolute highest academic qualification in the French system. But, he soon felt pretty suffocated by the official, rigid academic environment. So in 1931, that academic frustration drove him straight to Germany to study the phenomenology of Edmund Husserl alongside the works of Karl Jaspers and Martin Heidegger. And then came a dramatic crucible, the outbreak of World War II. He was drafted and then captured in 1940. Sartre actually survived a whole year as a prisoner of war, and amazingly, that's where he wrote his first play, Bariona. Upon his release, he headed back to Paris and joined the intellectual resistance against the Nazis. Talk about an experience that forged his worldview in fire. Moving right along to Section 2, Existence precedes essence. Let's see how this builds into his primary philosophical era, which really peaked when he was about 40 years old. The post-war era was a time of just exceptional productivity for him, culminating in a massive 700-page magnum opus. And that brings us to the very core of his thought. We are condemned to be free. Take a second to let that sink in. For Sartre, human freedom isn't just the nice absence of external boundaries, it's a fundamental existential reality. Even a prisoner, he argued, has the freedom to accept or reject their confinement, to choose their attitude toward it. But here's the catch. This absolute freedom is not a joyous gift, it is a terrifying burden. It causes what he famously called the anguish of freedom, that heavy, inescapable anxiety that comes from knowing we must constantly choose and that we are absolutely, entirely responsible for our choices and our very existence. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the contrast it shows. To understand his most famous phrase, existence precedes essence, just think of a manufactured object, like a knife. Before it even exists, its creator has a specific intended purpose for it, to cut things. Its essence, or its purpose, comes way before its physical existence. But humans? Sartre argued we are the exact opposite. We exist first. We literally just show up in the world with no predefined nature, no inherent purpose, and absolutely no script. We must entirely forge our own identity and meaning through our continuous choices. All right, Section 3, Pillars of Existential Philosophy. Now, while Sartre didn't invent this movement all by himself, thinkers like Kierkegaard and Heidegger obviously laid crucial groundwork, Sartre undeniably gave it its most consistent, comprehensive, and famous voice. He became the primary name associated with existentialism globally. So here are the 5 interconnected pillars of his existential framework. 1. Existence before essence, like we just talked about. 2. Absolute freedom and total responsibility. 3. Bad faith or self-deception. 4, the absolute necessity of commitment to a life project, and 5, consciousness and nothingness, this idea that human consciousness is a constant movement toward what is not yet realized. Okay, let's unpack the two most vital and, honestly, the most misunderstood concepts from this list.
First up, bad faith, or mauvaise foi in French. This is deeply relatable. Bad faith is the state of self-deception where we flat out deny our own freedom. It happens every single time we pretend we're forced to act a certain way, or when we blame our society, our upbringing, or our circumstances for the choices we make. For Sartre, doing this is basically a form of existential cowardice. It's fleeing from that anxiety of freedom we talked about. By making excuses, we treat ourselves as objects with a predefined essence, rather than as free human beings who are completely responsible for shaping our own lives.
So, the crucial point is that because we are free, and because we absolutely shouldn't live in bad faith, we must practice commitment. Freedom isn't just about floating around aimlessly. True humanity requires acknowledging the gap between what we currently are and what we want to be, and then consciously choosing a life project. By actively committing to a purpose and taking full responsibility for it, we give our lives direction and meaning. We literally create ourselves through this commitment.
Section 4, the politically and socially committed intellectual.
And this brilliantly illustrates how Sartre was not a philosopher who just sat up in some academic ivory tower writing huge books. He strongly believed the intellectual was obligated to engage with the messy social and political issues of their era. He lived out his philosophy as a fiercely active public figure. In terms of anti-colonialism, he strongly opposed European role, specifically French actions in Algeria and Vietnam. He even wrote a famous introduction to Frantz Fanon's book, The Wretched of the Earth, where he argued for what he viewed as the necessity of revolutionary violence for liberation. In politics, he engaged deeply with Cold War dynamics. He famously attempted to reconcile existentialism and Marxism in 1952, viewing Marxism as the era's true philosophy, while arguing existentialism belonged inside it to protect human freedom. Plus, he didn't limit his ideas to academic papers. He reached the masses through highly successful literature, like his brilliant novel Nausea, and plays like The Flies. Now, we absolutely cannot discuss Sartre without highlighting his profound relationship with the philosopher and writer Simone de Beauvoir. They met in 1929 and shared a bond that lasted all the way until his death in 1980. They never formally married, but theirs was a completely equal intellectual and personal partnership. They shared ideas, heavily critiqued each other's works, and fundamentally shaped each other's legacies. She was an absolute powerhouse philosopher in her own right and a deeply essential partner in his intellectual journey. Finally, Section 5, the lasting legacy in human thought. Sartre passed away in 1980, but his influence exploded far past his death. His legacy is simply monumental. He elevated human dignity by placing absolute freedom and responsibility right at the heart of our existence. He completely refused easy answers to complex moral questions, forcing us to face reality honestly. He also permanently established the model of the intellectual engagé, the committed intellectual who uses their voice to defend justice and human freedom in the public square. Decades later, his framework remains incredibly valuable for understanding modern ethical dilemmas in our complex world, and he continues to inspire academics, artists, and activists all around the globe. Which leaves us with this final, intensely personal question, based directly on his teachings. Are you using your absolute freedom today to commit to your life project, or are you living in bad faith, making excuses and blaming the world around you? It's a heavy thought, for sure, but one that Sartre believed was the absolute key to a truly authentic life. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks your curiosity to dive in and explore the incredible works of Jean-Paul Sartre for yourself.